It was the end of the Second World War. Berlin had fallen. Hitler had been dead for 2 months, and yet the fighting in the Pacific was still continuing, devastating and bloody. The USA was faced with a choice: initiate a large, full-scale invasion of the Japanese Isle, condemning countless Americans and Japanese soldiers to death, prolonging a brutal conflict. Or, the Americans could deliver a new invention: the atomic bomb. There were US ships tasked with moving parts of this new weapon closer to the Japanese mainland. One particular crew were tasked with delivering crucial cargo to a US airbase on the Mariana Island of Tinian, to be assembled and delivered to Hiroshima a month later. This was a top secret mission, so secret that none of the crew on board learned of the true nature of their mission until years later. The parts were successfully delivered to Tinian, and the crew had the unenviable job of then patrolling the waters of the Philippines. On July 30th, 1945, the USS Indianapolis was struck by 2 torpedoes from a Japanese submarine.
1,100 men went into the water. The vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about half an hour. Tiger, 13-footer. You know that when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking from the dorsal to the tail.
It's likely, unless you're a World War II buff, that you know the story of the USS Indianapolis because you heard it told by Captain Quint here in Jaws. You've probably heard that old film adage, show, don't tell. Hold on a minute there, that was quite a serious start to one of my videos, so I'm just going to roll back a tick. I saw Jaws in the theatre for the 50th anniversary this month, and for my third video I really wanted to cover it, and I wanted to make a more positive video to counterbalance those 2 kind of negative ones I've put out so far. Also, I can start to give an idea like my tastes in a film and what I consider to be a perfect film, which I do consider Jaws to be pretty much a perfect film. There's no lard, there's no fat to trim. Every single second of Jaws' runtime is in service of its atmosphere and its characters. But I'll be honest, everybody already knows that, right? Jaws has got to be one of those obvious films I'd choose to cover. What could I possibly tell you about Jaws that you haven't already heard? Well, I decided to give this video a lot of thought, and I decided to give it kind of like a thesis thing. Now, I'm regretting this already because I'm a stone Scottish lad. I'm really not cut out for this full-blown video essay style. I prefer just rambling reviews. I think I get more jokes out of that. But my thesis for Jaws comes back to that old adage, show, don't tell. And if you've spent any time around a film school, or you know someone who went to a film school, you've probably heard that a million fucking times. Jaws is great because it can be my wanky rebuttal and example whenever somebody says this. For me, Jaws proves that all the rules around filmmaking and writing are pish. Jaws practically shows you nothing, and it tells you pretty much everything. Jaws is not show, don't tell. It's tell, don't show. Now, I really don't want to spend too much time on the history of Bruce the animatronic. There's really extensive writing and videos on that subject, and how his frequent malfunctions contributed to the shark being on screen very little during the film. An upset that later proved to be a key feature of Jaws. This is made clear from the opening. The shark is not seen at all in that entire opening scene. Not a fin, a tooth, or an eye. It's all from the POV first person mode. Music, acting, cinematography, sound design combined to create a scene where, in reality, you're just watching a lady flailing about in water, but in your mind you're painting a gruesome, deadly picture of what's going on beneath those waves. What surprises me particularly about Jaws is how that idea of tell, don't show extends to all scenes, not just the attack scenes with the shark. You'd think this would be unusual for horror, our monster isn't working, we best pile the film with gore and graphics in order to scare the audience, right? Even after Chrissy is killed in the beginning, we never see her injuries or her corpse, only glimpses of her hair and her hands. And one of my favourite scenes in the whole film is when Hooper first arrives in Amity and he goes to the autopsy room to examine Chrissy's body. Again, Spielberg tells you without showing you a thing. The only thing we see is the size of the tray she was left in. It's a tiny pink tray. Then we hear Hooper list off her injuries verbally, and our mind is left to picture just how much is left of the shark's first victim. You really feel Hooper's fear in this scene. You see his sweat, you see him recoil in horror, and you hear him stutter out his report. I think it's masterfully done, and another great example of verbal exposition done right in this film. It really makes you imagine what Hooper is looking at without showing you a bloody thing. The now infamous third act of Jaws that takes place entirely on Captain Quint's small vessel the Orca tells us even more than we see, and if you somehow don't like this film, this is probably where you fall off entirely until Hooper gets into the cage later on. You're quite obviously a bam if you think that though, because this section of the film is without a doubt where Jaws manages to extract the most amount of personal tension and character drama, again, almost exclusively through dialogue and exposition. On my 50th anniversary rewatch, my favourite aspect of the film was the relationship between Quint and Hooper, and how their dialogue and rivalry echoes the overall tension of Amity Island, specifically the internal struggle of Chief Brody's character. Hooper being the over-analytical, never-satisfied scientist who understands the brevity and the danger of the situation and will sacrifice all personal and financial incentives to control the situation. And Quint being the blue-collared, old-fashioned, let the chips fall where they may realist with a better finger on the pulse of the expectations of their community. When the initial plan of the Yellow Barrels is underway, Hooper and Quint's poor communication and coordination causes mistakes and ultimately failure going into the first night of the hunt. This adds dramatic tension to these intense barrel chasing scenes. We're not focusing on the struggle between the Orca crew and the shark only, we're also focusing on the personal struggles on board the Orca between the crewmates. This conflict sets up the drunken nighttime scene perfectly, as we see Hooper and Quint slowly develop a mutual respect for one another. Quint seeing Hooper's boisterous and cocky side reminding him of himself, and Hooper being mesmerised by the backstory of Captain Quint. I mentioned this scene at the start, but I do think it's a prime example of how the film uses tell, don't show method I just made up. So I'm going to leave this legendary monologue for a sec and we're going to end the video on it instead. Following this scene, Hooper and Quint develop more understanding and less rivalry between themselves, so Spielberg shows us another follow-up barrel scene where both Hooper and Quint's methods are combined to overcome the danger, ending the film on the perfect visual metaphor.
Smile, you son of a...
Hooper's modern compressed CO2 canister being shot by Quint's wartime rifle. A combination of characters and ideals absorbed by Chief Brody to ultimately defeat the shark and overcome the struggle. All communicated to the audience through the dialogue and relationship of Hooper and Quint, told to you through exposition and character cues the whole movie, making the ending sequence more intense and the death of Quint more impactful. Alright, enough stalling. Quint's speech. Actually, I'm going to stall some more because Quint's speech isn't even the best thing about this scene, or rather, the scar comparison scene sets up Quint's speech so beautifully that you have to mention it. I love how the speech starts. After Hooper and Quint compare all the scars they have, Brody asks,
What's that one?
What?
That one there, on your arm.
Oh, well, it's a tattoo. I got that removed.
Quint has no marks from that day. The only memory he had, he got it removed. When he tells this story, there's no flashback, or it's not an honest account, just the horrific, buried memories that are told to the audience entirely through dialogue and exposition. Usually the biggest no-no in film, but here done to mimic the way the audience feels about the shark itself. We're forced to picture and imagine Quint's tragedy, just like we're forced to picture and imagine the brutal shark attacks the whole film. Jaws is a textbook film school example of a film that breaks all the rules and yet is still so overwhelmingly successful. It's a case study in the power of your audience's imagination when it comes to horror in particular. I reckon you could probably do a shot-for-shot remake of Jaws today with half of its original budget of $3.5 million, especially if you use like less famous actors, cut the extras down a bit. You could quite easily get all those classic shots again, maybe using a bit of CGI for the full-scale shark attacks, but what you could never remake is those characters, that writing and that struggle that the film depicts. Jaws likes to tell you things, not show you them. It wants your imagination to fill in the gaps. It wants its characters to do the same. Every character in conflict in the film revolves around the internal struggle of Chief Brody's character and how little information Amity Island has on what they're dealing with, exactly like the audience. I really hope this video was as entertaining and as funny as my last two. It's always difficult, I find, to talk about a film that you love. It's easy to shit on things you didn't get or find boring, but it's honestly tough to weave a needle through a film's plot, find all those messages and themes that make a film great. Jaws is great, but it's all in your head. again, thank you for watching. I'm going to go back to my Hypnotoad comment mode because I did get a great comment from user Matthew Cook on my first Errington video. Genuinely, I want you to check that comment out if you haven't seen it, because it's exactly what this channel is all about. I want class discussion like that popping off in the comment sections all the time. Not just because it gets my videos out to more folk, but I think there's a lot of value to be had in reading counter arguments and additional points to my videos. A lot of the time, especially with the Eddington one and other recent films that are coming out, the reviews are kind of like my first take coming out of the theatre. I try to write them down, my kind of stoner thoughts, and I try not to watch any other video essays or like any other analysis videos going into detail on the film, because I don't want to come across like I'm copying anyone or like have their ideas in my head. I want to just write down what I think. But please do comment if you like this video and let me know if you agree with this take, or if you love something completely different about Jaws, or if you hate Jaws and you think it's shite. I want all takes. Cheers. See you next time.